Hello, this video tells a story in which the neighbor reported her mother and her boyfriend from the police because they stolen hundreds of euros from her accounts, which she was saving from her education. Yes, it's really a crazy story. We're opening in the comments and enjoy watching.
I called the police on my mom and her boyfriend because they stole 9,000 V from my account, which I was saving for education. My stepfather took my 9,000 college fund, and when I confronted my mother, she told me to stay quiet. So I had them both arrested. Later, I found out that my father had left me a large inheritance, which my entire family had been using without my knowledge. Recently, my mom and her partner were arrested, and my maternal grandparents are furious with me. This all began when I reported them to the authorities, and I had every reason to do so. My mother and I never had a good relationship, especially after my dad died 8 years ago. I'm 19 now and about to start college in a few weeks. I always knew my mom wouldn't save any money for me, so I had to work and save on my own. I started working at 16, taking on part-time jobs after school, and I saved diligently over the past 5 years, accumulating nearly 9,000. I kept all the money in cash, safely hidden in a wooden box my father had made for me, tucked away in a corner of my closet. My mom never let me open a bank account, so that wasn't an option. I never told my mom or anyone else about my savings, so I was shocked when I discovered the box was empty. A few days ago, I found out the money was gone. When I confronted my mom, she told me her partner, whom ill called John, had taken the money to invest in his new house. I was furious. A huge argument erupted between me, my mom, and John, but in the end, I was just a powerless 19-year-old. I retreated to my room, locked the door, and cried for hours, feeling utterly lost and disheartened. I knew I had to start saving from scratch again, and I wasn't sure I could manage it before college. That was when I decided to take action. This theft couldn't go unpunished. 2 days later, I got my revenge. I called the police, reported the theft, and now my mom and John have been arrested for their crime. The only issue now is that my grandparents, who had always been on my side, are now against me, which doesn't make sense to me. John has been in my life for the past 3 years, and I've despised every moment of it. He's one of the worst people I've ever met, verbally and emotionally abusive, if not physically. My mom usually takes the brunt of his abuse, but he occasionally targets me as well. He curses at me and tries to make me cry, getting even angrier when I don't react, which makes him lose control even more. My mother never stands up for me. After my dad passed away, my mom didn't date anyone for the first few years. Then she met John. He was nice and tolerable for the first several months, but after their first big fight, he showed his true colors. 7 months into the relationship, he started manipulating my mom, and she let him move in. He moved in with us, and he was a lazy, good-for-nothing idiot who could barely hold down a job. For context, he is in his mid to late 30s and still relies on his parents for money occasionally because he has absolutely zero financial sense and constantly spends more than he earns. When he's fighting with my mom, he takes money from his parents, and when he's not fighting with her, he comfortably leeches off her. The sad part is that my mother isn't exactly wealthy and can't afford to support a partner who wants to live an extravagant lifestyle. She is the floor supervisor at our local supermarket, and while she brings home a decent amount, it's not enough for the kind of lifestyle Jake wants. I never let it become a problem for me. I always tried to be as independent as possible. Since I was 16, I avoided asking my mother for anything apart from basic necessities, and after I started working part-time, I wouldn't even ask her to pay for those. I didn't ask my mother to buy me anything, and the only thing I relied on her for was probably just shelter and food. I didn't expect her to do anything extra for me or go out of her way because I knew that even expecting that was pretty foolish. She made it very clear to me right from the beginning that she didn't like me. Even when I was a child, she was never very nice to me, and I always felt she didn't want me. As I grew older, that feeling strengthened into a belief. At least before, I had my dad to have my back and stand up to my mom whenever she would get too angry at me. But after he passed away, I was on my own. And that's how it has been for the past few years. Things just started getting worse when Jake came around, but I always consoled myself by telling myself that soon enough I would go away to college, and then I wouldn't have to worry about any of this. Now that seems bleak and unlikely to happen. For the 3 days after my money was taken, I just stayed in my room and did nothing because I was so depressed. The day after I learned that all my money had been taken away, we moved into our new house. I did all the work required of me but did not speak to either of the two people living with me, and they didn't seem to care either. On the third day, my mother told me that I had to get dressed in the evening because they were hosting a housewarming party. I started screaming at her, telling her I wasn't going to do anything of the sort because they had taken my money, and the only reason they were able to buy this house was because of the money they had stolen from me. That really pissed my mother off, and she told me that now that we were finally living in our own house and not a rented place, I should be happy for them and just suck it up and let this one go because I owed them for life anyway, referring to the fact that she had raised me. That doesn't even make sense because she was legally bound to do that, and it wasn't like she did me any huge favors. As for the house, it was too big for the three of us anyway. I knew they had bought it just to impress everyone with their upscale address and spacious home. I was really upset that day, and I did something I hadn't done before. I decided to call up my father's parents. It was kind of complicated because after my dad passed away, my paternal grandparents had distanced themselves from our family because it was too painful to keep in touch, I guess. I don't know why they had cut ties with us, and we were no longer on speaking terms, but I still had their numbers. I decided to call them as a last resort since my maternal grandparents, with whom I had a better relationship, were kind of neutral in this situation. When my money was stolen, I told my mom's parents about it, hoping they would talk to my mom and resolve the issue. However, they just told me they were happy my mother could buy a new house, and that we would finally have a place of our own without worrying about rent every month. They advised me to look on the bright side and find the silver lining. I thought this reaction was strange since they had always tried to be on my side before. They never directly confronted my mom, but they would always sympathize with me. This time, their response that I assumed he might not have had time to prepare. When my grandparents told me about this, I found it very interesting. I was pretty angry and frustrated by that point, so I asked my grandparents if they had any proof they could send me, which I could use against my mom. They said they would look for some documents and call me later. For the next couple of hours, I waited in my room, trying to piece everything together. I realized that my mom and Jake had likely teamed up to take my college fund for themselves to buy the house. I didn't think my mother made enough money to purchase the house on her own, and Jake had been unemployed for the past 6 months, so it was highly doubtful he could afford it. I just needed confirmation to report them to the police. After a few hours, my grandparents reached out to me and sent me photos of some documents. These documents showed my mother had signed an agreement to use the money my father left her to pay for my college tuition and to ensure that My mother signed those documents, promising to ensure that I would lead a comfortable life. I literally laughed out loud when I read that because she had done everything but ensure my life was comfortable. In fact, she seemed to go out of her way to make my life more difficult. Seeing those documents really pissed me off, and I was frustrated that my grandparents had never mentioned them before. They had distanced themselves after my dad passed away, and everyone had abandoned me. My mother had never really been there for me, and my maternal grandparents, who tried to be there, seemed to be just putting on an act. My paternal grandparents were too caught up in their grief to care about me. When I asked my grandparents why they had never shown me these papers before, their excuse was pretty lame. They said they had kind of forgotten about it after my dad passed away, and at the time I was too young anyway. Once I got older, we were not on speaking terms, and it had slipped their minds because they were getting older too. I couldn't argue with that, so I just let it go. Once I had the proof, I called a friend whose dad was in law enforcement and told him I needed his help. That evening, just as the housewarming party was getting started, my friend's father showed up with another cop and a lawyer to arrest my mom and her fiancé, GC. They had clearly broken the promise, and it wasn't just the broken promise that was the problem. By going against the terms of the agreement she had signed, my mother had opened herself up to a lawsuit. While I explained everything to the guests at the party, my mom and Jake were placed under arrest. It was the most vindicated I had ever felt in my life. Pretty much everyone they had hoped to impress, like some of their ex-co-workers and friends, were disgusted when they got exposed and taken away in handcuffs. Even then, they were too proud and arrogant, glaring at me as if I had done something wrong. My maternal grandparents were also at the party. When they saw their daughter being taken away in handcuffs, they were really upset and refused to speak to me after the party ended. Once everyone had left, I was left alone in the house, not knowing what to do next. I was heartbroken because, even though they had been arrested, they would probably be let out on bail in a few hours. Even though I was going to press charges, it would take months to prove everything. There was a strong chance they might turn the tables in their favor, and I wouldn't get back the money meant for me. I was going to lose out no matter what I did. I couldn't sell the house either because the names on the deed were Jake's and my mom's, not mine. Even if I wanted to legally force her to sell the house and give me the money, I would have to fight the case with a lawyer. Fortunately, my friend and his father assured me they would arrange for a lawyer and cover the cost, so I didn't have to worry about that. However, I was still at a loss. To make matters worse, the only people I had on my side, my maternal grandparents, were not speaking to me anymore. They told me they had no interest in speaking to me since I had been ungrateful, and they understood that I did not get along well. My mom's parents were upset with me, saying that sending my mom to jail over something like this, after she had done so much for me, didn't sit right with them. They had no interest in maintaining any contact with me. That really got under my skin because now I feel like I'm alone. I did win, for now, against my mother and Jake, but I feel like, in the long run, I might have lost a lot. I don't know what to do right now, and I feel completely helpless. Am I wrong for having my mother and her fiancé arrested for swiping my savings to buy their new house? Update 1. Hello, I have moved out of the house that I was living in previously, the one Jake and my mom had purchased. The reason for that is because it's been a week since I reported them to the police, and after being in custody for 48 hours, they were let out and came back home. As soon as I heard them come back in, I decided to get out of there because I didn't want any confrontation. I had my stuff packed up beforehand anyway, so I just had to leave. They walked in, and I walked out. They tried to get me to stop and speak to me, but I didn't want to, so I just walked out as quickly as I could. I got a cab that I had called for myself and headed straight to my friend's house. I have been living here for the past 3 days. For the record, this is the same friend whose dad helped me out with the arrest and the lawyer. Now, her father, the lawyer, and I are sitting together every single day trying to figure out how to wrap this up as quickly as possible. At this point, I am really desperate, so I'm willing to come to a settlement. We have arranged a meeting with their lawyer and them, along with a court-appointed mediator in a couple of days to see how the negotiations go. If they refuse to agree to my terms, we'll have to take this to court, and who knows how long that will take. I'm going to try my best to come to a settlement, but I want it to be fair, and I want to get the financial support I need to finish my education. My friend's father has told me that for now, I can expect financial aid from them, but I feel hesitant about accepting financial help from anyone else because it feels strange. As for my grandparents, nobody has spoken to me yet. My maternal grandparents and my father's parents stopped speaking to me right after they sent me photos of the document. I collected those documents from them in person so we have some tangible proof, but apart from that, we haven't had any interaction. Even when I went over to collect the documents, they were pretty nonchalant about the whole thing and just wished me the best. They didn't offer to help me or even invite me in to speak to me or anything. Honestly, I have no idea what's going on with them since their behavior has been really weird for me to deal with. Anyway, things have been really disappointing so far. I just hope that I can get over this as quickly as possible so that I can start college. That is the only thing keeping me going right now, and of course my friends are being really supportive, which I value because I don't have any family to speak of at the moment. These are the only people who care about me. Update 2. Hi. So there's been an interesting development, and I don't even know what to say right now. I'm literally shaking with anger because of what I found out. It's disgusting. Again, this is kind of doubtful, but then my mother had screenshots, so I don't know. There were just 2 days left before our meeting with the mediator, and earlier today, my mother reached out to me via email, saying she needed to talk. I had blocked her everywhere else, so she created a new email account to send me something that completely shattered everything I thought I knew. My entire family had conspired against me. That's right. The reason my grandparents had been acting so strange throughout this entire process was that they were all in on it from the beginning. My mother had not only used the money left to me by my father for herself, but they had all taken their share and kept quiet in exchange. This explained why my maternal grandparents were upset that I reported my mother to the police and why they pretended to care about me but never actually stood up for me when it came to my mom. She had dirt on them. It also explained why my paternal grandparents never bothered to tell me about the documents my mother had signed until I asked them about it. They were all complicit, and my mother sent me proof of it. She had conversations with them when I was around 15 years old, and she had records of these because they were foolish enough to discuss this via email. She sent me screenshots of these emails. My mom said that since I had her arrested, it was only fair that I drag everyone else into this mess too, because it wasn't fair for her to get punished when they were all part of the conspiracy to hide the money from me and use it for their own gain. My dad had left a significant amount of money for me, and all these people, including my dad's lawyer, decided to hide it from me and use it for themselves. I still can't believe this happened. I've been rereading the email, trying to make sense of it, because it seems unbelievable that my entire family, even my dad's own parents, were against me. The only reason they told me about the documents my mother signed and sent me proof recently was because their conscience finally caught up with them, and they had a change of heart. They realized what they were doing was wrong, and when I asked for their help, they decided to spill the truth. They had been planning to do this earlier, but my mother and her parents convinced them not to tell me the truth to avoid dragging themselves down. They promised that if I ever asked them, they would come clean. When I finally did ask for help, they sent me those documents as proof, and that's how all this came to light. While I'm glad they chose to help me, it doesn't absolve them. It also explains why they were so weird and distant. Even after helping me, they were guilty and ashamed. Right now, my brain is simply not functioning anymore. I don't know what to believe, and I don't know how to deal with any of this. I haven't even told my friend about what I found out because it's so overwhelming. I'm feeling betrayed, hurt, and angry, all at once, and I don't know what to do with these emotions right now. Obviously, I'm going to have to talk to my lawyer because this is a huge development, and we are definitely going to bring this up during the negotiations. My mother, in an attempt to turn the tide against the people who exposed her, forgot that she was also going to lose out on a lot of things due to this process. I'm glad she told me all of this because I needed to know that nobody has my back in this world, except maybe a handful of people. I cannot rely on anybody, and that's just how it is, I guess. The only thing left to do right now is to tell my friend so he can communicate it to his father, and then we can all sit down with my lawyer and decide what to do about this and how to go forward. But no matter what, I'm definitely going to college this year. I've made up my mind, and I'm not backing down. I'm ready to ask my friend's dad for help. I'm not going to ask him to pay my college tuition, but I guess I'm going to ask him to be a co-signer on my loan application because I think that's the only thing I can do right now. Update 3. Hi, we had a meeting with the mediator today, and like I said, I definitely brought up everything my mother told me in the email. She basically confessed to everything she had done, so she's going to have to cough up the amount that she and the rest of my family have stolen from me. However, she also tried to claim that some of the money went into my upbringing, so we cannot hold it against her and should not expect her to return any of that amount. But I insisted that my grandparents needed to do so. Not only did they take that amount of money away from me, but they also took away my dreams and aspirations, and I demand that they return it to me so I can live a respectable life. I am not going to be dependent anymore. I spoke to my lawyer and my friend's dad about it, and they said things like this are definitely not unheard of, but that does not take away from how sly and disgusting it is. They were outraged, just like I was. And they told me they were going to make sure that I don't have to rely on anybody else for money my entire life. The kind of money they have stolen from me would have made me comfortable every single year of my life after my dad passed away. He had taken all the measures to ensure I led a happy life, but my family couldn't stand it. They had to take it away from me because they are just that selfish. Well, that's not going to fly with me any longer. My lawyer and I had a talk and decided that we were going for the throat. There's no need for us to sit back and let them have their fun, especially on my dime. Things got pretty brutal there, but one thing's for sure, we are going to have another meeting. But this time my grandparents, all of them are going to be present because they were part of this as well. Things might go to court, but until then I'm just going to take out a student loan and deal with it. But I'm going to make sure that I get my justice. More than justice, I need to get back the money that they have stolen from me. All of them have to pay me back because the money that was meant for me was mine and nobody else's. They broke the agreement my mother had made, and they also broke the promise all of them had made to my father to protect me and keep me happy. They are all failures, and I never want to see them again.
Hello everyone, it's really amazing story. What do you think? Comment, put like, subscribe to the channel on Instagram and Discord. Good luck!